welcome to Let's Talk About, a series spotlighting leaders, authors, artists, marketers, creators, and entrepreneurs, sharing tips and their expert advice on business, media, technology, and frankly, life itself. I'm your host, Cynthia Nelson, three-time entrepreneur, Forbes contributor, investor, and advisor. Today, we're talking to Conrad Persons, president of Grey London, and you're coming in from London today, coming in hot. I'm in LA, you're in London. I hope you're getting some good weather because every time I go to London, I don't always get good weather, but welcome.
I'm af- I'm afraid the weather here is not very Californian at all, but it is lovely to be here nonetheless. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. You have a really eclectic background. You've lived all over the world. Like, how did you get from, to president of Grey London? Like, what does that background look like? Where have you been? How did you get there?
Well, you've said something that I think is absolutely true, which is it tends not to be a straight line, and mine is definitely not. I would not have imagined that I was in London or necessarily working in advertising many years ago, but life has a tendency to just happen. I started off thinking that I would be in the world of politics, actually, and I'm pretty far from that world now, although there are some similarities. So I started my first kind of internship was on Capitol Hill in the U.S., working for a Democratic senator called Max Cleland, and I got really interested there in something that ended up having pretty big implications for me later. And that was this idea of messages going out to millions of people to try to shape a narrative, whether that narrative was around a piece of legislation or culture or how people should feel about, their neighbors. It was a pretty broad array. And it was really interesting to see, you know, small clusters of very determined people that wanted to tell a particular kind of story. Sometimes that can feel really nefarious in politics, but a lot of the times it's actually, there is actually the common good,
Right.
at heart. And that planted a couple of seeds for me, I guess, around storytelling and mass audiences and how you shape a narrative.
Super interesting. And then you've also, beyond being in the ad industry, like you also had your own company. So tell me how you started that, why you started that, and the phenomenal growth of it, obviously. And I won't steal your thunder on what happened to it, but let you go right ahead.
That was really one of the great joys of my career, and I had met some really interesting people at a role that I had in London. So I'd lived in New York for a while, started my career at Ogilvy there, and then moved to London and had a number of different roles there. And I met some founders, and it was a founder and an entrepreneur that I fell in love with first. The idea of that and the idea of becoming that. And it wasn't for power or control. It was actually it seemed like there was this incredible privilege that you had to build a culture to take up the most of people's waking hours, at that time were spent at work, and how those people felt about those waking hours and whether they enjoyed them and used them to reach their potential, express themselves, be authentically them. All of that seemed like a founder had an enormous amount of control over and influence on, and that seemed like a very cool privilege. And I met someone who was completely different than I was, and that to me is the tip I would give a lot of founders looking for co-founders. I found someone who I had shared values with, but a
Yeah.
very different set of skill sets
Yeah.
with. And you, as an entrepreneur, will know all about that. But that was really valuable. And suddenly, when you find a person like that, things seem possible that might have seemed insurmountable or incredibly different before. And the first decision we made, and his name was Jonathan Williams, wasn't what the business was. The first decision we made was that we wanted to work together, and because we thought we could build something. And we were both really big advocates of technology, and the way that we thought it was going to fundamentally change the world of marketing and strategy and creativity. And we were also real students, I guess, of startups, and we thought it was really fascinating to intentionally go into a business that might have traditionally been quite analog and manual and blend this world of kind of real startup culture, technology, but also, innovation, change. And we found some great like-minded people. And what our core offer to clients was really about growth. And we found this opportunity to bring in lots of different disciplines because we felt there were insight agencies and there were ad agencies and
Yeah.
they were strategy agencies, and in the end clients weren't necessarily asking for a laundry list of agencies. They were just looking for a way to grow. So we brought in people from a number of different disciplines: management consultancies, semioticians, qualitative researchers,
Mhm.
creative artists, and talked to clients about where they wanted to grow and how they wanted to grow. And we started to invent new products and services for them. And the business grew in London. We eventually established a base in New York, and ultimately got to a nice size that gave us the right type of growth, caught the interest of my previous employers at WPP, and WPP acquired the business in 2018.
So do you, I know from that side of it too, on the acquisition part, it's a great thing, but it's also, oh, it can be a little sad. It can
I
be a little sad, and you're back in corporate, so it's like, how do you take, you know, those learnings, maybe this is like the next kind of segue, how do you take those learnings of entrepreneurship, keeping it fresh,
Yeah,
bootstrapping, getting in and really finding out what the customer needs versus like, here's all the stuff we have to offer, but really, what do you need? And how do you apply that today in the role that you have at Gray?
it's a great question, and you're so right. Before I answer your question about the feeling,
Yeah,
uh,
the
wh-
sadness, the overwhelming
yeah,
sadness. Yeah.
I went through a sense of loss, which
Mm,
I'd expected all exultation, celebration, this is
yeah,
amazing,
yeah.
the dream, etc. And there was definitely some of that, and I am grateful to the universe that it happened. But I actually felt a really deep sense of melancholy and loss at the same time, which was gave me a bit of emotional whiplash because I hadn't expected it at all.
And you were working with clients, all over the world.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah,
it wasn't like you were just I mean, you were like China, India, Singapore, Indonesia, Asia, like you were
absolutely,
working all over the world. So you were also able, I think, to take all those unique learnings, maybe, of entrepreneurship,
absolutely.
rolling them into with what you're doing now.
Yeah, and that was great. I had a really great opportunity to spend some years in Tokyo early in my career, which was hugely influential to me. Um, it really gave me a crystal clear sense of how a market could operate under very different rules, yet be equally successful. It basically taught me a very simple lesson about there always being more than one way. And it's also a country that is obsessed with innovation and
Mhm.
change and evolution, yet also obsessed with tradition,
Grounded
and
in
heritage and history, right?
100,000 years of tradition, right? So many things don't
Completely.
change, but yeah, it's the other side. The tech side's so interesting.
Exactly, exactly. And that kind of taught me one of the things that is still a point of fascination for me today, which is trying to identify false choices. And there's usually opportunity there, right? If someone tells you it's all about tradition or technology, they're
Right.
probably wrong. You can probably do both. If someone tells you about it's all about craft or it's all about automation, actually it's probably a bit about both, etc. So Japan and I think Asia in general in my time there was really good at highlighting so many of those choices that I'd been told were fixed as actually being false.
Yeah. Which I think it runs true everywhere
Yes,
in the world.
yes,
I mean, it
completely.
probably was more in your face there, but it definitely
Yes,
undercurrent
yes,
everything else we do today. Oh, it's this way, it's that way. No, it's actually in the middle somewhere.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, completely.
so you're also doing, a lot of things, I think, on the creative side, and just gonna bring up AI because it is what it is today. What do you think? Like, is there anything exciting about it? what do you think is interesting related to AI in creative and strategy? And, it's coming and brand transformation.
Yes,
It's coming, but, what are you guys thinking about it?
it's a good question. I view it as an opportunity rather than a calamitous threat. That doesn't mean I don't think there are risks.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I think there are some negative outcomes that will result from it,
Yeah.
intentionally and unintentionally. But generally, I view it as a real opportunity. And I think as a leader, I'd be doing the people I work with a disservice if I was in denial about it and its kind of inevitability in some stages, in some ways. Um, I'm really excited about a lot of its potential. I'm excited about its potential from a strategy side immensely. A lot of my background is in strategy. And whether it's strategy or creative or culture, even, I tend to think about it much more as you know, building a better paintbrush, making one pen a thousand pens. I think about
Mhm.
it as a tool, a means to an end that can massively accelerate human potential, not the total doomsday scenario of something that will replace human potential and creativity. Um, and on strategy, I just love the access to opinions and information and data and the ability to synthesize that at pace and use that as a start point
Yeah,
for then
exactly.
thinking about what it means. I'm not asking it to write a strategy, I'm not asking it to be an opportunity finder, but if it can accelerate some of the work in doing that so that I can be more imaginative about opportunity, that's a really good thing.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm seeing it playing out.
Mm,
I was talking to somebody the other day who was a business partner of a really large talent in the US, like top 10 grossing female talent.
well,
And he said it's just so crazy. And I've known them 30 years before she broke. And I said, how are you guys doing with AI? Like, what's happening with her? He said, oh, it's so crazy. Our agency will deliver stuff to us. And it's like, it's literally her talking on the screen with her accent, the way that it is, that's so crazy, and her accent and everything. He's like, yeah, that's great, but we're still going to record it. We're still recording the real thing because it's so he said they're delivering us, spots and
yeah.
spots, uh-huh, and VOs and everything that are literally recorded with her very specific accent.
it's
So
it's it's extraordinary. It's
yeah,
really extraordinary, and some of the transcreation potential and some of the platforms that I've seen lately is incredible. Immediately being able to take a short clip or promo and turn it into culturally specific, and fully, fluently translated languages,
yeah,
across a number of places at once. All of that I think is really interesting. But into your, to the earlier point though as well, I think that imagination is will continue to be one of the most invaluable human qualities ever before. How we can run towards AI instead of running away from AI in its ability to support that imagination and amplify it and speed it up and reduce processes that take away from our time to use our imagination.
right.
That's what's really interesting to me. um, if you got a chance to do one thing in a few hours that used to take a week, that to me
Yeah.
is more time to be imaginative, more time to be creative, more time to be human. So,
And I wonder
um,
how that's going to actually even roll back into education a lot.
yeah,
Why are we spending, with kids, they're spending the rote stuff that they're learning that actually they're not really using versus critical thinking and creativity when the
yeah,
rote stuff they can get from AI. They can get, answers, they can get things that they need that are just the baseline, but that's the creativity and the critical thinking that
yes,
actually use that rote information to create new opportunities and innovation, technology, human kindness, like those things that we've kind of pushed to the side as soft skills, like really are the hard skills that are actually needed now to be able to harness what AI can do. I mean, I just that thought process, that's all.
I think it's really interesting. The education piece is fascinating, and Education's also been something really interesting to observe in different markets as well, right?
Right.
There are some countries' educational systems have historically, in places like Japan, they've actually skewed really hard towards rote memorization.
Yep.
Others have been much looser and about critical thinking, and obviously many markets in Europe are a bit of a hybrid of those.
Yep.
But to your point, it's, what does good look like, and what does one need to learn? And you know, memorization or certain technical processes feel really less valuable, now today. But I think problem solving and imagination are become really interesting, and that's a different type of learning, right? It's a bit more
Yep.
independent learning.
Yep.
It's a bit more experiential learning,
Yep.
actually doing stuff versus just reading about it. So it'll be really interesting to see, what that looks like in 20 years.
Yeah, I even think like the whole working across cultural lines,
Mm,
the whole work, everybody's working virtually and many people are working virtually still, but that whole ability to work across cross-cultural lines is a skill.
yeah,
You have
yeah,
to take in consideration what I'm saying. The words I'm using to express myself may come across really differently to this person who is my counterpart in Japan and may think it's rude of me to say something I don't recognize as being rude. I'm just a, you know, Western, just like say it like it is versus, you know what I'm saying? Like
I do.
that's such a skill to have and be able to bring teams together. Like that's a bigger skill than I think than, you know, like learning the law. I mean, a law degree is great, amazing. I think that's going to be interesting what happens to the whole law industry because everything
Yeah,
will be sucked into it. You'll be able to get lots of data from it. Not that not law degrees amazing, like amazing to have, but getting that data and being able to understand it and comprehend it in a way that you can actually utilize it or make decisions or help make decisions or be a stakeholder in it, I think is one thing that's great. But I think the other side is being able to communicate those things across different groups within your own organization, managing up, managing down, sideways,
I completely
cross-cultural.
agree.
I think those are much more difficult skills. I think different type of skills to learn, maybe.
I agree, and it kind of really speaks to a couple of things. One thing that's really interesting when a lot of executives go to a new market, there's a massive amount of emphasis and time invested in language learning,
Yeah.
which, as it should be. I've often found that there's a very small fraction of time dedicated towards cultural insights and local rituals and local understanding.
Yeah.
And if it was as simple as learning the language, which is not always simple, but if it was as simple as that, then we'd have a lot more internationally successful individuals, right? And teams that were working in harmony globally. But
Mm.
so much of it is, to your point, is the soft stuff. It's the interpersonal stuff. It's the historical context. It's the cultural context, etc. And that stuff really, really matters, especially where culture is often the leading reason why we know change and transformation fails.
No, exactly. Um, you have been doing some really great work also. I want to highlight this. You developed a scholarship.
Ah, yes.
Tell me about that. Not only do you do everything under the sun and work globally and sold a company, but you're also giving back. Tell me about it.
It's something that is really important to me, and I feel really fortunate to be able to have done it. There is a scholarship named after my parents, Ray and Wendy Persons, and it's really focused on opening up access to great education in the US, in Virginia in particular, at the University of Virginia, to people who have historically not had access to education. So it's quite targeted and focused on first generation students,
Mhm.
especially those from backgrounds that might be rural, where no one in their town, city, locale has encouraged them or necessarily had the opportunity to go to college, or someone who's simply hasn't had the means historically and therefore their family hasn't done it. When we know that so much wealth and knowledge is generational and passes down bloodlines, for people who don't necessarily have that, it's very hard to hop on that ladder. So the scholarship is a small but meaningful step, I hope, in trying to address that.
That's really amazing. That's really great. In our parting words, what is exciting you today about the future of advertising when everything seems to be topsy-turvy in the rest of the world and everything we're doing not going there, but uh, you're lucky you're in London. Uh, uh, what excites you about advertising? What still keeps you, waking up in the morning and being excited, even without a cup of coffee? Like what does it for you as I drink my coffee?
People. I walked in this morning through the bright glass doors of the agency and stride down, you know, through the studio, and the energy and ambition and hunger and curiosity of human beings and the teams here is what I live for. It is my greatest source of energy. It's definitely my greatest source of ideas, and people who come in for an interview, for a talk, wanting desperately to break into this industry because they're fascinated by it, because they're hungry for it. It's hard to be jaded in the presence of people like that. Although
Yeah,
it's easy to be jaded in the world today, it's hard to be jaded in front of someone who's 20, 21, 22,
yeah,
45, 50 years old, who wants to break into
yeah.
this industry because they admire it and they desire a place at the table. That keeps me excited, and I'll forever be thrilled by it.
I love it. Thank you so much for everything. And how do people reach out to you if I've got folks around the world who want to get in touch with you personally or directly through the company?
Yeah, please do. Conrad.persons@gray.com, or find me on LinkedIn, Conrad Persons, president of Gray London.
Awesome. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you having me. Great to talk.